everybody. Welcome to the next edition of Think Suburbia, the podcast of the Suburban Virginia Republican Coalition. I'm Jill Cook, one of the co-founders of SUVGOP and co-host of this podcast. And with me is Mary Campbell, another of the co-founders of SUVGOP and the co-host of the podcast. And Mary, we are so happy to have Brenton Hammond with us. Would you please introduce him and welcome him?
Thank you, Jill. Brenton, welcome. We are so delighted to have you with us today. We understand that you are running in the House of Delegates, District 43. Could you tell us a little bit about your district as to the demographics, the location, etc.?
Absolutely. Well, first, before I get started, I want to thank the both of you for having me today. What you do is so critical for us candidates and helping us to get out our message. And this is taking time out of your schedules. So to everyone involved in putting this podcast together, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. And I mean that. To tell you a little bit about District 43, so it covers a portion of Fairfax County, Alexandria, and all the way down to Lorton Station. And to kind of someone that's trying to get a real geographical location, we're outside the Beltway, and we start right at the Huntington area, and we work our way down towards Lorton Station. So if you're familiar with Telegraph Road, If you kind of think of Huntington Station all the way down to Lorton, that pretty much encompasses District 43. It covers Franconia, Kingstown, Rose Hill, Fort Belvoir, Lorton Station, and Lorton. About 60,000 voters last count, and we're a diverse district. We have a lot of demographics within our district, a lot of different community, ethnic groups represented in our district. So it's a rich district. It's a true representation of Northern Virginia.
Wow, yeah, that's great. And speaking of Northern Virginia, you work for a defense contractor here in Northern Virginia, but prior to that, you served several years in the U.S. Secret Service Uniform Division. Okay, that's kind of an interesting precursor. How has that prepared you, if at all, for running in the House of Delegates in this area?
Sure. Well, I am blessed. I truly was called to the Secret Service, and it was a blessing to be called to the Secret Service, where I was able to protect two sitting presidents, multiple world leaders, and I served in several events that took place in the United States as well as overseas. So I had a rich 8 years in the Secret Service, and obviously being in law enforcement in general, it's a family community. So I still keep in contact with my law enforcement friends, and it was something that taught me so much. Being in the Secret Service, it taught me discipline. It taught me critical thinking. It taught me how to make split-second decisions. It also taught me how to plan. It also taught me how to work together with different people, not only within the Secret Service, not only throughout the country. We also worked a lot with local law enforcement wherever we traveled in the United States. And when we went overseas, we worked with the local law enforcement in that respective country. So it taught me to work with different people to accomplish the mission. So the biggest thing I got out of my time in the Secret Service is mission, being mission focused and mission oriented. And I think what we have right now in Richmond is a General Assembly that is not mission focused and not mission oriented. They're more focused and beholden to their political ideology. They're more beholden to worrying about re-election instead of the mission.
Right.
And the mission is making sure the voters of District 43 and at large, the residents of Virginia get what they need from their state legislature. It's making sure that we don't dismiss one group because maybe they didn't vote for us, and that we represent those that sent us to office. So the Secret Service taught me so many skills on communication, working with people, being mission focused, and making sure that we put forth a good product to make people proud. You know, in the Secret Service, it was our job to make sure, this is what most of us say every night, that the president gets to go to bed safe and sound. That's a successful day in the Secret Service. So what we need in our servants in Richmond, and that's what they should be, servants, what we need from them is to be mission focused and saying, at the end of the day, did I help every person, every constituent, and do the best job that I could? And if we're not asking that question, if our current elected officials aren't asking that question, in my humble opinion, they're not fit to serve us in the General Assembly. So those are some of the qualities that I think I will bring to the General Assembly, should I be so grateful to be elected.
Brenton, before we move on, I really want to thank you for being a member of our law enforcement. There's too many people in our society today that don't appreciate you, but I can assure you that we as members of the SUVGOP are most appreciative of your service and all that you have done for our country and will continue to do. So thank you so very much. We're very appreciative. I'd like to talk for just a minute about the fact that you've said that there are critical issues facing Virginia. And we were especially interested in, you mentioned the crisis playbook. You've described it as what has Richmond learned since March of 2020. Can you elaborate on this and tell us a little bit more about what you were thinking?
Absolutely, Mary. Thank you for asking. So let me go back to the Secret Service time. You know, we were always known to evaluate a significant thing. So every inauguration, for the average person watching the inauguration, they think, oh, the Secret Service does this every 4 years. So, you know, they just do the same thing. And it's quite the opposite approach. It's after the inauguration, it's what could we have done better? And what things should we be thinking about for the future? And in between the 4 years of each inauguration, it's not we just use the same script from the last time. It's what dynamics on the ground have changed, what have we learned, and how do we make this inauguration the best? So when I sit back and I see what's happened the last year and a half in Richmond, and I see the fact that it truly seems like Richmond was just shooting from the hip on a lot of decisions, whether those were decisions that crushed our businesses and didn't allow them to function properly. You know, when I think about our businesses, these are the folks that created the jobs in the first place. They're entrepreneurs, they're big thinkers. So we didn't even bring them to the table on how best to keep them open and functioning during the pandemic. When I look at certain situations that we faced, even in the grocery stores with certain supply chains, and I know that was nationally connected and in many ways globally connected, but what was Richmond doing to say, okay, this is what we had. Now, how do we learn from this and make sure that we don't make the same missteps in the future? So when I talk about this crisis playbook, the reason why I don't say pandemic playbook is we don't know what a future crisis could hold. Right. But so maybe it's not a pandemic, but with a crisis playbook, what we do is we would have this on the shelf of the governor, you know, have this ready in the General Assembly. And that way we go and say, okay, what partners, what subject matter experts from the community, from business, from health, from whatever the situation may be at the time, bring those people to the table. And then how do we say, how are we making sure at a state level, at a regional level, and at a local level, there's clear communication? How do we make sure that we have the resources that we need? So if one part of the state has a bigger burden of the crisis, what resources are we shifting over there to make sure they're taken care of? And then how do we surge those resources back to a new area that has a crisis? So it's kind of a standard operating procedure. And in the government, we love to say SOP. It's an SOP. It's a playbook of how we handle a crisis. And yes, it's not going to encompass every little detail, but it gives us a blueprint. So that way we're not just running off at the hips. We're not just shooting off ideas and then having to correct 2, 3, 4, 6 months later after we've already caused damage. A thing with the crisis playbook is we're not asking for perfection because we know that's not possible in human beings. But what we're asking for is some concerted effort to make sure that we are putting forth a reasonable, logical plan that is most effective for the residents. So that's kind of my thinking on a crisis playbook. And it'd be one of the things I'd be wanting to work with as soon as possible to implement in the General Assembly.
Well, that makes too much sense for government. That's a great approach. I dearly hope you're there to implement that because that is fabulous. So just diverging a little bit. So you and your wife, Courtney, you're very committed Christians and very active in your church. I love that. Would that influence your policy position? Issues such as, supporting local businesses, charities, public safety, education. How does that figure into it? How you would, sort of develop your policies?
Sure. Thank you for asking that, Jill. I would not be here if it weren't for Christ. I believe at the end of the day, and I tell this to volunteers, and I tell this to people that are connected with the campaign. At the end of the day, it is more important for me to honor Jesus Christ than to do anything else. And if that means that folks don't like a position that I take, so be it, because ultimately I want to be able to come before him and say, God, I honored you. Courtney, who's the bedrock of my life, we just celebrated 10 years back in April.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She also is a licensed minister. We just believe that servant leadership, Jesus Christ was no better example than a true servant. In scripture, he references the least of these, and that's not putting anyone down, but where we often see Jesus in the Bible is not with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It's with those that society would say they don't matter. Mm-hmm. And part of my philosophy and part of where I would go in my thinking and legislation policy is, am I honoring those who feel like they don't have a voice? Am I putting a magnifying glass on those that say, oh, politicians don't care about me, government doesn't care about me? Am I serving, am I putting my time and effort not just to those that want something from a lobbying perspective, but am I putting my time and effort to the person that stops me in the grocery store, mm-hmm. to that single mom who's looking for, to make sure the state has her back so that way she's able to continue to function and continue to be able to afford to live, and should she have kids, be able to make sure they have the best education. Servant leadership, I think, will be the root of every decision that I make. Also, if I'm talking about my faith, it's admitting that I don't know all the answers. It's admitting if I make a mistake that I made a mistake, and how do I fix and correct that? I think currently, and a lot of our elected officials, these folks will not for one time say, I apologize, or say, you know what, I got this wrong, because they're worried about the next election.
Right.
And I don't want to be that type of public servant. So I think if number one, I'm rooted in service, if I'm rooted in love, if I'm rooted in my principles that guide me, that is what I will bring to every decision that I make. And I think that's what we need more of in our public servants at any level of government.
Brenton, you are such an impressive candidate. I've been involved in politics for over 40 years, and I am extremely impressed with the candidates that the Republican Party is running this year in the House of Delegates. Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about how you are working with all of these delegates surrounding you? How are you enhancing each other's campaign? And why do you think that is important?
So I think we have some of the, as you just alluded to, Mary, the best candidates we've ever put forth. And that's not a slam to any previous candidates. You have so many that truly are in this because they feel there is no representation of their districts and where they live. They truly feel like they've been walked over, and that it's this one size fits all. And if you don't like that, then you have no place in a part of civic government. And one of the ways that I built relationships with almost all of the candidates in Northern Virginia, and even outside of Northern Virginia, Southwest Virginia, Hampton Roads area, Southern Virginia. And one of the ways that here in Northern Virginia, I believe in building a team is, number one, we regularly communicate with one another to say, hey, do you need something? You have an event that we can find some time? And it's tough to clear out time to maybe step outside the district. But I think it's important when another candidate is having an event engaging, their community. If other people can see, wow, there are other candidates here that want to see that candidate's success as well. Wow, that's pretty cool. Even going around and door knocking. I've recently just went door knocking with the Republican candidate for mayor for Alexandria, the city of Alexandria. And, it's taking time to let them know that I care about you. And in turn, they're turning around and doing the same for me. They're coming out and going door knocking with me. They're going out and coming to some of my events as well. And then I think it comes down to what can we do on social media? If that's putting out a message on our page for an upcoming event, because maybe there's a voter or that we're friends with that isn't even aware that there's someone running in the district they live in. It's kind of an all of the above approach is what I feel is going to get us over the finish line. And then before I wrap up this point, messaging about what we're for, messaging not just about, when we win, but what are we for? And then how effectively are we going to govern? I'm going to win and I want to win. But I think if people don't know, okay, well, we'll pass November 2nd, then what are you going to do? People want to feel confidence that their representative is going to effectively govern. So I think it's staying on message. I think it's telling the voters what we're for and offering them a clear contrast about why they should vote this November for their Republican candidate.
I love that. I love that, staying on point and what you are going to do, not what is good about what we're doing, not what's all the bad stuff. I just have to say, was that Annetta Catchings you were knocking with?
Yes.
She's fabulous. Oh my God, she's great. I hope she wins that race.
Me too. She's awesome. She's awesome.
Yes, she really is. So Mary.
Yes, Brenton, we're almost at the end of our time today. As we wrap up, have we missed any points that you would like to make? Would you like to talk about special interest, hobbies, anything else that you would like for us to know?
Sure. Well, before we begin to wrap up, I do want to say, I think it's important, education and education in Virginia. It's critical. And we're really at a kind of a crossroads about where we want to go as a state. And I think it's important, whether you have children or whether you do not have children, that you're paying attention to what's going on in our state, in our education system. And let me tell you, we need school choice. And if the last year and a half taught us anything, it taught us that we need school choice in Virginia. We need parents to be able to make the decision where best to send their child. That does not take money away from the public school system. That does not take money away from any teacher's salary. Kind of one of the big misconceptions that's put out there about school choice. But we need an education system also that's encouraging academic excellence and not indoctrination. Mm-hmm. It's teaching our students how to think and not what to think. So we're at a critical road here when we come to Virginia. And I want anyone listening to this podcast to know a vote for me is a vote to make Virginia #1 in education, to give parents school choice that they need, and to make sure that we are teaching our young people in the most effective way that allows them to compete not only among their peers in Virginia, not only among their peers in the United States, but on a global stage. And then one more point I'd like to make, when we talk about our law enforcement, I have friends that work in city police departments, county police departments, state agencies, and federal agencies. And law enforcement feels attacked right now. Yeah. They don't feel supported. Right. So it was so sweet of you to offer your thanks to me, Mary, but so many of our law enforcement brave heroes, they don't feel that way. And I want anyone listening to this podcast to know unequivocally in Brenton Hammond, I will 100% back the law enforcement and give them the tools that they need. I won't propose legislations like what was proposed in our General Assembly that lowers an assault on a police officer because there were no physical marks. Yeah. That is unacceptable, and it sends the wrong message to criminals. Yeah. And then for our small businesses, and this is the last point I'll make, you need to have a climate that allows you to thrive in your business. You need to know that the state has your back and you're not going to get burdensome taxes unfairly placed on you. You're not going to have burdensome regulations that stifle your growth, that stifle your bottom line, and prevent you from even hiring. So to the small businesses in District 43 is rich with so many small businesses. Know that you have an advocate in the General Assembly. So those would just be a few issues I would like to touch on in our ending time. I again want to extend such a huge thank you to you, both you, Jill and Mary, for doing this. It's stuff like this that reminds me why I'm running, because there are people that truly care about the Commonwealth, and we want what's best for the Commonwealth. This isn't always about bickering and fighting and being divided. This is about a future and a hope for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I appreciate you all doing it. And I'd ask anyone listening to go to brentonfordelegate.com. That's brentonfordelegate.com. Please go to the website, make a donation. If you sign up for ways that you can serve and help out, we could certainly use it. I could use all the support we can get and all your prayers that you can get. So I kind of had a long ending there, but thank you both
that's
for
fine.
this amazing opportunity.
This is what we wanted. I'm so thrilled you got to do that. And I have to say, you already answered the last question. We always ask to give their website. Thank you for doing that. But I just want to say something you said in your closing and all those issues. What we see, because we work with a lot of candidates and we work with the statewide, those issues we have such a great statewide team. And they are emphasizing protection of law enforcement, support of law enforcement, educational choices and stuff like that. And you were just like right in sync with them. And this is, the message on the local and the message on the statewide is really together. Those are winning issues, and we are just thrilled to have you as hopefully our next delegate to implement all those things that we talk about that are really going to help Virginia.
Absolutely.
Get back to where we should be. And did you want to add anything, Mary, then?
No, again, Brenton, thank you so much. We really wish you the very best.
Yes, thank you for being here. Give our best to Courtney.
I will.
So thank you, audience, our listening and viewing audience. Thank you for watching this edition of Think Suburbia. If you want to see all our other great podcasts from the last couple of years, we have many candidates and we have some issues. You can go to our website, SUVGOP.com, and you will find a drop-down menu that says SUVGOP podcasts. And there you'll find a wonderful library of all the things we've done. So thank you again, and we'll see you on the next edition of Think Suburbia.